The winter winds of 621 BC swept through the high stone corridors of Assur's northern citadel, carrying with them the smell of iron, wet clay, and something far more unsettling, anticipation. The city's heartbeat thumped beneath layers of dust and empire, but in the women's quarter of the ziggurat, the air was silent. It was the kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from resignation. Talia pressed her palm against the cold stone wall, absorbing its tremor as soldiers marched past outside. She counted their footsteps, not because she feared them, but because the rhythm reminded her she was still alive. She was 20 summers old, daughter of a once respected scribe, now reduced to a mark in the king's new fertility ledger. A list of names, ages, and bloodlines recorded with chilling precision by men who believed they could engineer loyalty into existence. The empire needed soldiers. It needed laborers. It needed obedient subjects who could be trained from birth. And so the king's advisors had devised a program that would make the wombs of chosen women, any women, property of the state. The practice was ancient, older than the empire itself, but what had once been a rare decree in times of famine had now hardened into policy. Talia had been chosen because of her father's lineage. Fertile stock, they called her. She still heard the phrase at night, whispered in her sleep like a curse. Her friend Neria slipped into the chamber, cheeks flushed from the cold. "They're calling the first group," she whispered. Her voice carried fear wrapped in a brittle attempt at bravery. "The overseer said they'll begin the assessments before sundown." Assessments. Another word sharpened into a weapon. They think if they change the words, they change what it is, Talia murmured. Neria nodded, though her eyes were far away. "Do you ever wonder," she said quietly, "what the women before us felt? Centuries ago, before anyone questioned this." Talia looked at her. "I don't think they felt any less afraid." A horn sounded from the courtyard. The women around them stiffened as the heavy doors creaked open. The first group was let out, 20 women, veils lowered, heads bowed. Some of them had been here only days. Others were born into this place, raised for it like livestock. Talia's stomach twisted. Through the narrow slit of the chamber window, she watched the procession cross the courtyard toward the hall of selection. A long banner hung above its entrance, embroidered with golden lions and the king's decree for the strength of the empire. Strength. Talia wondered what strength truly meant to the men who enforced these rituals. Did they hear the muffled sobs at night? Did they watch the tremor in a woman's hands as she signed the clay tablet acknowledging her fate? Did they ever doubt? She forced her gaze away. The chamber door opened again. This time, the overseer himself stepped inside. Commander Ishkin, tall and stern, with a face carved from unyielding stone. Behind him trailed 2 scribes clutching wax tablets. "Talia of Nadab," he called. The room froze. Talia felt her heart stutter, then begin to race. She swallowed and stepped forward, though her knees shook so violently she feared she might fall. Ishkin studied her with clinical detachment. "You are summoned to the hall for evaluation," he said. "Prepare yourself." Neria grabbed her wrist. "I'll come with you until the gate," she whispered fiercely. Talia squeezed her hand in gratitude. They followed the overseer through the corridors, past carvings of ancient kings and their conquests, past murals depicting harvests, victories, and gods who looked down with eyes too calm to understand suffering. The deeper they walked, the colder the air grew. As they neared the hall, voices echoed, officials murmuring, scribes chanting the lineage records, women crying softly into their hands. Talia halted at the entrance archway. The gate loomed overhead, wrought with bronze patterns meant to symbolize prosperity. To her, it looked like a cage. Neria turned to her, forcing a smile that crumbled at the edges. "You come back to me," she said. "Whatever happens, promise me." "I promise," Talia whispered, though she didn't know if it was a promise she could keep. A guard stepped forward. Only the chosen may pass. Neria's fingers slipped from hers. Talia stepped through the gate alone. Inside, the hall was blindingly bright. Torches cast unforgiving light on the polished stone floor. Women stood in orderly lines, each accompanied by a scribe marking details on clay. Hip width, family history, number of siblings, prior births. Each fact turned into a number, each number into a value, each value into a verdict. A man in ceremonial robes approached Talia. "Talia of Nadab," he said, scanning his tablet. "Your lineage aligns with the requirements for the King's Third Initiative. You will undergo full evaluation." She felt as if her lungs had collapsed. "And if I refuse?" The man blinked, puzzled by the question, as if refusal was a foreign concept, an impossibility. "The Empire does not recognize refusal," he said simply. "Only compliance." Her fate, it seemed, was already inked into the ledger. But as she stood beneath the blinding torches, a strange fire ignited in her chest. Not rage, not yet, but the first spark of something dangerously close to defiance. Talia lowered her gaze so the officials wouldn't see it burning. The assessments began. The hall of selection smelled of hot oil, incense, and fear, 3 scents that never truly left its walls. The officials who moved through the chamber did so with an unnerving calm, as though cataloging women's futures was no more troubling than counting sacks of grain. Talia stood on a raised stone platform where the light was harshest. Her pulse fluttered in her throat as scribes circled her, murmuring measurements, lineage data, and fertility markers as though she were a specimen on display. She held her arms close to her body, shielding herself from their scrutiny even though she knew it offered no real protection. "Age, 20 summers," one scribe recited. "Mother's line, healthy for births. Father's line, scribe caste, no known illnesses. Disposition, compliant." Talia stiffened. The last entry felt like a trap laid in a single word. "I have not been tested for disposition," she said quietly. The scribe looked up, paused. "Your conduct suggests it," he replied, marking the tablet as if stamping a verdict. She opened her mouth to object, but another official approached, a woman in long, embroidered robes, her expression unreadable. Her presence silenced the scribes. "Talia of Nadab," she said, "I am Matriarch Sarum, overseer of the women's registry. I will guide you through the next phase." Despite her gentle tone, something behind her eyes revealed a deeper truth. She had long ago learned to lock away her compassion to survive within these walls. Sarum's gaze swept across Talia's trembling fingers, the stiffness in her shoulders, the way she kept her chin slightly lifted in defiance. "You understand why you are here?" "I understand," Talia answered, "but I do not accept it." The matriarch's expression flickered. Not surprise, but something like recognition. "Acceptance," she murmured, "is rarely the beginning of obedience. It is often the end." Before Talia could ask what she meant, a horn sounded, deep and resonant. The scribe stepped back. Guards lined the far end of the hall. A group of nobles and military officials entered, their robes trailing behind them like drifting shadows. "This," Sarum whispered, "is the Review Council. They will make the final designations for the King's Initiative." Talia felt the walls closing in. Designations. Another word shaped to hide cruelty. The council took their seats on a crescent dais. Commander Ishkin stood among them, arms crossed. His expression was as unreadable as ever, but something about the way he looked at the women, like they were inventory, made Talia's stomach churn. A counselor rose. "Begin the presentation." Women were called one by one to stand before the dais and answer questions about their health, their ancestry, their past marriages. Some trembled so violently their voices barely rose above whispers. Others stared blankly, their spirits already extinguished. A few tried to speak bravely, only to be dismissed with curt nods from the council. When Talia's name echoed through the hall, her legs felt oddly weightless. She stepped forward, every sound magnified. The scrape of sandals, her own breathing, the soft rustle of robes behind her. A gray-bearded counselor studied his clay tablet. Talia of Nadab, strong lineage, adequate health, no prior union. He looked up. You are suitable for the third initiative. The chamber quieted. Even some of the scribes glanced at one another. Talia swallowed. What does the third initiative require? Commander Ishkin answered. It is a selective program for producing children loyal to the throne. You will be paired with a chosen lineage partner. You will bear at least 2 children for the Empire. You will reside in the state quarters until your duties are fulfilled. His tone was matter-of-fact, but the consequences struck like a blow. Talia's breath hitched. She pictured her father's small courtyard, her mother's warm laugh, Neria's hand gripping hers at the gate. She imagined all of it slipping away, sealed behind palace doors she would never again open freely. I refuse, she blurted before sense could silence her. The hall seemed to stop breathing. Commander Ishkin's eyes narrowed. You do not have the authority to refuse. Talia lifted her chin. Then why do you ask questions as though we have any voice at all? You measure us, judge us, command us, yet you pretend it is the strength of the Empire. Strength built from suffering is weakness disguised. Gasps rippled through the hall. 2 guards took a step forward, but Matriarch Sarum raised a hand. Wait. She approached Talia slowly, her expression tight, but not unkind. Bravery is admirable, she murmured, but it is not a shield. Then, in a voice loud enough for the council to hear, disruption noted. Recommend reassessment of emotional suitability. Ishkin frowned. Her lineage is valuable. Are you suggesting she be dismissed? No, Sarum replied. I suggest she be placed under observation. Fear may temper her insolence. If it does not, she let the sentence fade. The council conferred briefly, muttering among themselves. At last, the gray-bearded counselor spoke. Talia of Nadab, you'll spend the next 3 days in the quiet wing for evaluation. Your final designation will be determined afterward. The guards approached. Talia's knees weakened, not from fear of what awaited her, but from the crushing realization of what her defiance had cost. She would not return to the women's quarters tonight. She would not see Neria. She would not have a moment to breathe without a guard shadow on the wall beside her. As they led her away, Matriarch Sarum leaned close enough for only Talia to hear. Do not break, she whispered, but do not burn too brightly. Flames are noticed and extinguished. The words chilled Talia more than the guard's hands on her arms. The quiet wing awaited, a place where even the walls learned to keep secrets. The quiet wing lay beneath the main citadel, carved not from prideful stone, but from the earth itself, old, cold, and heavy with the weight of forgotten voices. The guards escorted Talia down a spiraling stairwell lit by flickering oil lamps. Their flames swung in rhythm with each footstep, casting distorted shadows that crawled along the walls like restless spirits. When the final door opened, the guards released her into a dim corridor where the silence was so thick it pressed against her eardrums. The only sound was a subtle drip of water echoing from somewhere she could not see. A single attendant waited for her, a thin woman with hollow cheeks and tired eyes. She neither smiled nor sneered. She simply bowed her head and motioned for Talia to follow. Your chamber, the attendant said quietly, leading her to a small cell. Food will be brought twice a day. Water is in the corner. The matriarch will visit when the council requests her report. The cell door groaned as it closed behind her. Talia sank onto the narrow stone bench. Her breath trembled. She tried to steady herself, but the enormity of the quiet wing pressed into her chest like a boulder. She touched the wall, half expecting to feel warmth from other women imprisoned before her. Instead, the stone was icy, unforgiving. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only minutes. Time dissolved without the sun. At last she heard footsteps, soft, hesitant. "Talia?" A voice whispered. She jolted up. "Neria." A pale face appeared at the narrow barred window on her door. Her friend's eyes were swollen, likely from crying. "They said you were taken here for refusing. I feared the worst." Talia swallowed a surge of emotion. "I'm alive. For now." Neria gripped the bars. "Talia, I need to tell you something before they find I'm missing. There are rumors among the women, quiet ones no scribe hears. Some say the third initiative is different from the others, more controlling, more permanent." "Permanent how?" Talia asked, though she already feared the answer. "They choose partners with care, lineage pairs, and once chosen, the women cannot return to their former lives. Ever. They stay in the breeding quarters for as long as they remain useful." Neria's voice cracked. "It's said that after the second or third child, the women are replaced." Talia's stomach turned. Replaced meant discarded, sent to labor camps or quiet corners of the empire where no one returned from. Neria lowered her voice further. "Some whisper that Sarum herself fought against this initiative years ago. She was overruled. Now she carries out orders, but I don't think she believes in them." That revelation flickered like a candle flame in Talia's mind. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Neria stiffened. "I have to go," she breathed. "Please do not give in." "Not yet. I'll find a way to help." Before Talia could respond, Neria slipped into the darkness. Moments later, a guard paced past her door, unaware of the conversation. Talia pressed her forehead to the cold bars. For the first time since entering the Hall of Selection, she felt something other than despair, an ember of determination. If Neria could risk punishment to warn her, then she, too, must find a way to survive. Another day passed in the wing's suffocating gloom. Talia slept lightly, waking at every distant clang or whisper. She heard faint sobs from other cells, barely audible, but enough to remind her she was not alone in this quiet prison. On the third night, the door scraped open. Matriarch Sarum entered, walking slowly, holding a lantern that cast trembling yellow light across the rough walls. "Talia," she said softly, "stand." Talia rose, though her muscles were stiff from cold. Sarum studied her face for a long moment. "You have not broken." "Was I supposed to?" Talia replied. "In this place," Sarum said, "many do. The quiet wing is misnamed. It does not quiet the body. It quiets the will." She hesitated. "But you still carry the fire I warned you about." Talia looked her in the eye. "Why warn me at all?" Sarum exhaled slowly. For the first time, she looked less like an overseer and more like a woman carrying invisible chains. "Because I remember what it is to be powerless, and I know what becomes of those who resist too openly." "Then help me," Talia whispered. "Please." Sarum's eyes softened with a kind of grief. "I cannot save you, not openly, but I can shape the Council's judgment. I will recommend you for a less restrictive role in the initiative, one that may give you space to breathe." Talia's heart pounded. "And the others?" "My friend Neria." Sarum hesitated again, longer this time. "Your friend is Spirit, but Spirit is dangerous here." She stepped closer. "You, Talia, may yet survive this if you learn when to fight and when to bend." Talia clenched her jaw. "Bending becomes breaking." "Not always," Sarum murmured. "Sometimes it keeps you alive long enough to change something." Talia said nothing, but her gaze did not falter. Sarum sighed. Tomorrow the council reconvenes. Your fate will be decided. Be prepared. As the matriarch left, the cell door closing softly behind her, Talia sank onto the bench. Survive long enough to change something. The words lodged themselves deep within her. A seed, a promise. But survival had never felt more precarious. At dawn, she would face the council again. And this time, defiance alone would not be enough. A pale dawn crept over the citadel, but in the subterranean halls of the quiet wing, the light arrived only as a faint tremor in the stones. Talia was led upward by 2 guards, her wrists unbound but her path unmistakable. Each step carried the weight of 3 days spent wrestling with despair, hope, and the fragile promise Matriarch Sarum had offered her. When she entered the hall of selection again, it was quieter than before. The torches burned lower, their flames steady and watchful. The review council sat in solemn formation, the same crescent of power, but something in the air had shifted. Even the scribes sensed it. Their quills hovered above tablets, waiting. Matriarch Sarum stood beside the dais, robes immaculate, yet her eyes haunted by the long night she, too, must have endured. When she saw Talia, there was a flicker, approval mixed with warning. Bring her forward, Commander Ishkin ordered. Talia stepped into the center of the hall. The gray-bearded counselor cleared his throat. Talia of Nadab, you completed 3 days in the quiet wing. This council will now determine your role in the 3rd initiative. His words echoed like stones thrown into a deep well. Sarum lifted her tablet. Before the council deliberates, I present my assessment. She looked directly at Talia. The subject remained strong-willed but not unstable, capable of discipline, capable of reliable service if placed in a supportive role within the initiative. Murmurs rose among the counselors. Commander Ishkin frowned. Matriarch, you previously warned that she posed risk of disruption. A risk, Sarum replied gently, is not a certainty, but letting such lineage go to waste is. She paused. And strong will could be shaped, if given space, not crushed. It was as bold as she could afford to be. The gray-bearded counselor tapped his tablet. Your recommendation? Sarum exhaled. That she be assigned not as breeding stock in the restricted quarters, but as an attendant recorder in the women's registry, under my supervision. Shock rippled through the hall. An attendant recorder, still within initiative sphere, still bound to service, but not trapped in the breeding chambers, not isolated from the world, not condemned to bear children for the state on demand. It was a place where eyes and ears mattered more than the womb, a place with cracks in the walls through which truth might seep. Commander Ishkin's jaw tightened. You would place a dissenter within your records, within reach of information. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I would place a woman with a mind too sharp to waste in a pen. Talia felt her heartbeat slam against her ribs. Silence fell. The decision hung like a blade suspended by a single thread. Finally, the counselor spoke. Very well. The council grants the matriarch's request. Talia's knees nearly buckled. Relief washed over her, thin, fragile, but real. Her life would not end in a hidden chamber. Not today. That evening. The women's quarters buzzed as Talia returned. Neria rushed to her, eyes wide with disbelief. You're alive, she breathed, clutching Talia's hands. They're saying you're to work with the matriarch herself. How did you? It was Sarum, Talia said. She found a way. A small one, but enough. Neria pulled her into a fierce embrace. I knew you'd come back. Talia held her tightly, fighting the sting in her eyes. But as they parted, she noticed something else, fear lingering in Neria's gaze. What is it? Neria swallowed. They chose me for the third initiative. I leave tomorrow. The world tilted. Talia felt cold seep through her. "No," she whispered. "No, there must be something." "There isn't." Neria tried to smile, but it faltered. "But you survived the quiet wing, Talia. You're stronger than I am. And now you're close to the records, close to the matriarch. If anyone can change something, even a small thing, it's you." Talia's lungs burned. "I won't abandon you." "You can't fight them head on," Neria insisted. "But you can watch. You can learn. You can choose moments that matter." The same words Sarum had spoken. "Bend, but do not break." As night settled over the citadel, Talia sat awake long after the others slept. She'd trace her fingers along the clay tablet she'd been given for her new role, its surface blank, waiting for ink, for names, for truths. She thought of the women whose fates would soon be etched upon these tablets. She thought of Neria. She thought of centuries of silence. And she understood that her survival was not an ending, but the fragile beginning of something dangerous, a seed planted in the cracks of an empire's foundation. Weeks passed. Talia worked beneath Matriarch Sarum, recording lineages, listening to officials, learning the quiet rhythms of the initiative. She watched the chains, how they tightened, where they loosened. She learned who questioned orders in small ways, who looked away from cruelty, who whispered regrets after torchlight faded. She learned where change might take root. And Sarum, without ever stating it aloud, let her learn. One evening, as they reviewed new entries, Sarum murmured, "Names have power, Talia. Empires believe they control them, but history remembers differently." Talia looked down at the tablet before her, freshly pressed clay bearing 20 names. Women chosen. Women lost. She set her stylus to the surface and added notation Sarum had quietly permitted her to mark. Status under review. It was small. It was subtle. It bought time. But in a system built on rigid inevitability, time could be rebellion. Sarum glanced at her work, then at Talia. She gave a single, nearly imperceptible nod. A crack in the stone. A beginning. Centuries later, historians would uncover fragments of tablets from Assur's citadel, records of women whose names had once been assigned to serve an empire's ambitions. Some tablets bore those same subtle marks. Status under review. Small disruptions. Small acts of defiance. But enough to reveal a truth. Even in the harshest systems of control, humanity leaves traces that outlive brutality. And sometimes a single refusal, spoken in a hall of power, echoes far longer than the decree that tried to silence it.